Hello, it is June 28th, 2025 at 3 p.m., and we are here to interview Faye Chin for the Mapping Houston Chinatown project at the University of Houston. Our interviewers include Karis Wu, Daniel Killian, Arshia Yassin, and Dr. Melody Lee. So, Ms. Chin, thank you so much for agreeing to interview with us today. So our first question is, you grew up in Houston's 5th Ward, right?
5th Ward, yes.
Yes. So what was it like growing up there?
Well, since I was pretty young, I didn't notice any problems. And luckily, when we moved into the neighborhood, my father is sort of a PR person, so he doesn't know, he gets along with everybody. So we were very fortunate. We were probably one of the first 10 stores in Houston. And I think there were other stores already in 5th Ward, but our store was right across the street from Kelly Court, which is a government project that's about 4 square blocks. And so we were very, very fortunate. So our little mom and pop store did very well there. And immediately we established a very good connection with our customers. They sort of watched out after us, and they made sure that the rest of the people that were in the neighborhood found out that we were easy to deal with. We gave the ones that needed it credit and things like that. We even had customers that said that my mom worked too hard in the store, so they came over once or twice a month and stripped the beds and cleaned her linens for her, and they always cooked extra food for us. So I enjoyed being in the neighborhood, and I mean, we played with the neighborhood children. We were out at night in the neighborhood, and well, back in the 40s, it was just a different world.
Okay. You mentioned in your You mentioned in your interview for Rice that your family's grocery store primarily served Black clientele and that this was something of a norm back then. What were race relations like between the Chinese and the Black Americans at this time?
Well, I think that's the reason so many of the Chinese went into the Black neighborhoods is because there was quite a bit of prejudice against the Blacks and against the Asians. So the two of us the Chinese and the Blacks were sort of empathetic with each other, and they understood the problems that we were both having with the prejudice. And I think because we were both minorities, I know the reason that my dad didn't go into a white neighborhood was because his English was a little bit limited. And although he had worked in many restaurants before we had the grocery store, and they were always in white neighborhoods, mostly downtown Houston, he just felt like that it would be easier, and it was easier. In fact, when we opened our grocery store, there were only 2 Chinese grocery stores that were not in the Black neighborhoods, but the most of us were in Black neighborhoods. And the 2 that were, it just so happened they were a little bit younger. Well, one of the gentlemen was educated. He was my dad's age, but he had come over as a younger man, and he got to go to school, so he was able to read the newspaper, and he's very well. He became very active after he retired. He's one of these people that works the polls and things like that. So he was very, very articulate in English. Dad learned English, and he could certainly communicate with anybody, but he always had the accent, and he was a little bit self-conscious about it. So, but like I said, we got along pretty well with the neighbors, and they all really took good care of us.
Thank you. So in that Rice interview, you also mentioned that you attended a primarily white school growing up. What was that like, and were there other Chinese students in your class?
Well, we went to the closest white elementary school was, let's see, I'm trying to think. It was Sherman High School, and what we did was the parents. There were several families that had school-age children the same age as we were, so the parents sort of exchanged carpooling. They took turns driving us to school. If my dad drove us to school in the morning, one of the other parents picked us up in the afternoon, because it was a pretty long distance. And so I went 1st and 2nd grade to public school, and then I went 3rd grade through 5th grade to Catholic school. Then I finished 6th grade in another public school just before because we had moved out of the store by that time. And we moved into a neighborhood in the north side of town that was basically blue collar white.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, so even though you were able to attend, going off of that question, so you went, when you were a child, you lived in Fifth Ward, you moved to a blue-collar white neighborhood, you attended a white school, but you mentioned that your parents were, in the Rice interview still, that your parents were prevented from buying a home in Montrose on account of their being Chinese. Would you say that residential segregation was strictly enforced in Houston when you grew up? If so, how? Sorry, that was a lot of
There
words.
was not, certain neighborhoods had restrictions, and I was really surprised at that neighborhood in Montrose because afterwards a lot of Chinese moved into the neighborhood. Our real estate lady told us that she knew that it was illegal, that if we wanted to buy the house, that there was a way that we could probably buy it. But Dad said that he didn't want to move into a neighborhood where he didn't think we would be welcome, because he was very friendly, and he didn't want anyone to be mistreating us, okay? So we didn't move into that neighborhood, and so we just moved. Most of the Chinese actually bought new homes in Lindale. Do you know where that is? That's between Fulton and Irvington. It's on the north side of town. It was a pretty nice neighborhood. The same person that developed Lindale is the company that developed West U. So they're the same type of houses that the old West U houses were before they started tearing down and building all the fancy houses there. But we moved north of that because, I don't know, at the time you could either buy a brand new house, and we were sort of in a hurry to get in a house, so we bought one that was already built just about 2 miles outside of Lindale, north of Lindale. So we were sort of on the other side of the tracks, but that was okay because we were still zoned for the same schools.
Okay.
I went to Jeff Davis, which is now called Northside High School.
So our next question is, you've mentioned that most of your Chinese friends growing up were in the church. Was this the Chinese Baptist church?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you have any memories from that church that you'd like to share?
Well, actually, we lived downtown before we moved to Fifth Ward and had the store, because my dad was a partner in a restaurant in downtown Houston, and we lived on Bell Street, where the Exxon corporate headquarters was. That was a duplex there before they built the high-rise. And then, of course, since then, Exxon has moved to Spring. That's where their new campus is. But we had a duplex, and a lot of the missionaries that were in China were back in the United States because of the war. And they all went to First Baptist Church, which was downtown, happened to be right across the street from the restaurant that my dad had. Mm-hmm. So the lady that lived in the duplex next door to us was a good friend of some of the missionaries, so she told them about me. And so then they found out that there were other children about my age, so they started a mission. The missionaries that came back from China were looking for something to do, so they started a First Baptist Church downtown, gave us a space that they started a mission for us. And then we went around gathering up. My dad told them where there were other kids about the same age. And it was basically sort of a daycare on Sunday for us and to work with the missionaries. We had one missionary that never married, and she rode the bus on Wednesdays out to Fifth Ward after we started the mission and did a Bible study with us. And that was pretty brave of her too, because she was an elderly lady and she rode the bus by herself, and she rode the bus home. But again, it was a different time, and you could do stuff like that. I don't know if you guys interviewed the George G family or not. There was 12 children in the family, so we met in their home. And of course, if nobody else came, there were already 7 kids there, so it was fine. So my sister and I, we always walked over on Wednesday for the Bible study that she had for the children. They gave us the room on Sunday afternoons after 2 o'clock, which worked out fine because most of our grocery stores stayed open until noon on Sunday. And even though most of our parents did not go, they did drop us off. And then they did visiting with each other, and then they came and picked us up from the service, which lasted we started at 2, and they probably came and got us at 4. And we did a little bit of socializing. That's when we were able to see our other Chinese friends, because all of us were going to different schools, except there were quite a few that actually went to the same schools that I did, because, like I said, most of us lived over on the north side.
Okay.
Okay, so when the church eventually moved to the Lamar location, and then even eventually to the Brogdon Street location, what were your experiences and your thoughts about that?
Okay, we moved to Lamar, I think in 1953, but we were still just a mission, a First Baptist church, even though we had gotten enough money, saved up enough money to build our own building. And then we did not become an independent church, I think, until 1957 is what I see in the rules. In the history of the Chinese Baptist Church. And by that time we had had several pastors. Our first pastor was a Caucasian gentleman that started the church, and then the second pastor that we had was Hong Sit, who was our pastor until they found out that he was a Pentecostal minister. And he's the Pentecostal philosophy is a lot different from most Protestant churches. And so most of our parents being new Christians, it was really offsetting for him to be speaking in tongues. So I pretty much, I graduated from high school in 54, went to the University of Houston, and then moved to California in 57. They became an independent church after I moved to California in 57.
Okay, got you, thank you.
And then the story about how the city wanted to buy our lot, and we're now the southeast corner of George R. Brown Convention Center is where our church was. That part of the building is where Hamilton and Lamar are. And they moved out to Memorial and bought 5 acres of land because they got so much money for their little half block.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you moved to San Francisco after school, but you've moved back now. So what motivated your decision to return to Houston?
My husband was an engineer, and he was offered a job. One of his coworkers had come back because that's when the oil, big 1973 and 74, was when everybody from California and up north moved to Texas because of the oil industry booming. So he got a job with Baker Hughes, with the Offshore Technology Department, which was a special department that they had just formed because they were having so many oil spills. And so while he was working for Baker Hughes, his claim to fame was he built the pipe that stopped the oil spills. And every oil company bought it, at that time. And then basically he invented a thing that did away with that whole department. They didn't need an offshore technology department anymore. But we were here, and I was home. My husband never acclimated to Texas or Houston because he said it was too hot and too flat, because he's from Boston originally.
So I don't know if you remember this, but you mentioned during an Asia Society dinner, the one that we met you at, that you're a relative of Jim Wing, who has been cited a few times as owning the first Chinese restaurant in Houston.
He was my father's uncle.
Oh, okay. And he was even cited as being the first Chinese person in Houston. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about him?
Okay, well, fortunately, my dad had 6 uncles. 4 of them were able to migrate to the United States eventually. My grandfather did not. My grandfather and the oldest uncle did not come. So my grandfather was son number 3. Uncle Jim was son number 4. Uncle number 2, these are all my dad's uncles. Number 2, Uncle Jim came to Texas probably in the late 1800s, and he had restaurants all over. He was really good at opening restaurants, but he got restless and he didn't know how to cook or anything like that, so he would just open them and then he would sell them. And so most of the restaurants that he did open were purchased by other Chinese people. Dad worked, my dad loved, he never liked the grocery business. He was always a cook at heart, but my mother liked the grocery business because it was something that she could do, because she thought being a cook was harder work, and it was, being in the hot kitchen and everything. But anyway, Uncle Jim opened up Most of his restaurants were in the downtown area, and I think the restaurant that Dad and his cousins partnered in before those cousins got married was also one that Uncle Jim found. So he also had his children were my dad's first cousins, but he had a couple of children that were younger than me, and so but they were actually the tail end of my dad's generation. And then I'm now the oldest one in my generation, because all the rest of them were the ones that were a little bit older. They just passed away really recently. One of the things I wanted to do was go back to California and visit my cousin who would have been 96, but she just passed away. I was thinking, okay, I got to go visit her, because I tried to talk to her on the phone a couple of times, and her English was just good enough, because she was a doctor in communist China. And but she was hard of hearing, so we really couldn't communicate very well. So when I told my sister, she said, well, I should plan a trip back so I can go and see her. And then she passed away in May, and I went back in November, because I had planned, my nephew's wedding was in November, so I knew I was going, so I missed seeing her, because she would have been a good one to get information that you guys are trying to collect, because she knows about that generation. And she's also very fluent in Chinese, which I'm not.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss.
But like I said, I only saw her a couple of times. She actually moved to the States just before I moved back to Texas. So we did get to talk a few times. And let's see, I think she was 96 or 98 when she passed away last May. So she's been gone a year.
So as you know, our project is about Houston's old Chinatown and that area in East Downtown. So what are your memories of that area when you were young, and how is it different when you came back as an adult?
Well, when I came back, actually, it was when I came back in '74, when it was just really trying to get organized. The original Chinatown was over on Smith Street, and Smith Street used to be the last street that was on the west side, because it bumped up to Buffalo Bayou, and I think they filled in a little bit of Buffalo Bayou, because now after Smith Street they've got Brazos and Bagby that have extended and bump into the Buffalo's Bayou. But they had just a couple of buildings over there, but Liang, which was the big building in Old Chinatown on Chartres and Russ, their first building was on Smith Street. And that's where it was just a big house that was a two-story house, but it was big enough so that they could have meetings there and small socials. And then they opened up the one on Chartres Street. And most of that was developed, I think, by Lang Wu. Did you have his name in any of your stuff? Because his father opened the Blue Star Cafe, which was on Main Street, and my dad also worked at that restaurant. But that was Mr. Wu's father. And his brother just passed away a couple of years ago, and he was over 100. But Mr. Wu passed away quite a few years ago. But this was an older brother, I think, that just passed away. So, and I didn't know him personally, but I knew of him because, like I said, he and another gentleman that helped develop the Asian Chamber of Commerce, where I also work, I was afraid that might happen. So anyway, they tried to develop, and it was a better location actually. And the building that they built did have a room that was big enough so that we could do dinners. And what they did for the dinners were they would get the good cooks to go in during Lunar New Year, and they would have the things just like they do in Chinatown now, but they would have to do them different weeks. You would have to sign up for which week you wanted to do your family a party. But that's how they did it down there in the Chinatown area. And then they had the Onlyang as a merchants association, but they also had the gambling there. And then the restaurant that was there was Sunday Lux, that my father closed because we were a good friend of the G's who owned that restaurant. Okay. Harry G. Jr., have you talked to Harry G. Jr., the attorney?
No, but I've listened to his interview.
But his father opened the restaurant, and he opened quite a few restaurants, and he sort of did, his father sort of took care of the G's, like, not my dad, but one of my dad's uncles, like Uncle Jim. You know, he kind of got all the Joe families started in business, or he would vouch for them and things like that, and help them get credit from the wholesalers and the vendors. And so that's what my Uncle Jim did, and Harry G. Sr. did that for the G family, because he was sort of their patriarch, isn't that it? Yeah, patriarch is a P, matriarch is a lady. Right?
Yeah. So since then, a lot of those businesses have either closed or moved elsewhere, and now like the biggest Chinatown in Houston is in Bel Air.
Right.
So why do you think this shift happened?
Well, I think in 79, or was it 79, the Vietnamese were coming over, 74, 75? Well, when they came over, the one in downtown was pretty well developed, although there were some Vietnamese Chinese that did open businesses in the original one. But because there was no more space down there, I think, and the land was very cheap over in Bel Air at the time that they came over. So they actually, I think the Vietnamese are actually the first ones to start going over there. And so the Chinese just thought, okay, well, they were smart enough to buy land while it was still affordable. And that's why they probably moved out there, because Bel Air used to be nothing but country. In fact, the Galleria, I worked in the Galleria area across the street where that other little mall is, right across the street. Mm-hmm. I worked for a company there. The Galleria was not even there in 1960, 58, and 59. But Sackwitz Department Store, have you heard of it? Mm-hmm. It was there. And so I worked for a contact lens place that had a little store in the shopping center where Home Goods is or something, or TJ Maxx. That's what's over there now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Let's see. So when you came back from San Francisco, did you find the Chinese community in Houston had changed? How or how not?
Well, a lot of folks from Shanghai, northern Chinese had come. Mm-hmm. And I found out that we didn't know everybody anymore because it was very, my dad sort of thought he was the goodwill ambassador, and every time somebody new, especially from the village or from an area that was close to where they came from, moved into Houston, well, he made it a point to go introduce himself. Oh, do you have children? My daughter can pick them up and take them to church. And so that was sort of my job. I took everybody to church that sort of moved to town until they could get acclimated and decide whether they wanted to stay at the church. Because I started driving before I graduated from high school, and I had the only car, as a teenage girl. Some of the boys had cars, but most of them drove trucks. I had a car.
Nice. So you're someone who's pretty involved in the community, and in your Rice interview, you talked about working with the Asia Society, about putting together charity galas, and more. So can you tell us, what got you interested in being so involved in the community, and what kind of things do you do there?
Well, when I was in San Francisco, I went to work for the San Francisco Hilton Hotel. So that's how I got involved in the hospitality business. And the man that I worked for was really well known in the industry all over. So when I moved back to Houston in 74, and they found out who I'd worked for, I was offered a job in every hotel in Houston. I went to work for the Astrodome Hotel. I don't know if you remember that. Mm-hmm. Right after Judge Hallfines had built it. And so when we were at the Astrodome Hotel, we had all the fringe benefits of being able to go to everything at the Dome and at the, not NRG, but the other little Astrodome. So all the rodeos and everything, and then Astro World was across the street. So we got all the tickets to everything. We didn't have to pay for any kind of entertainment. My son got so bored with taking it. People would say, "Oh, you can get tickets to Astro World." So I said, "Okay, Craig, here are tickets. Take them to Astro World." So I would just leave them in the park, and they would just walk back over to the hotel. Mm-hmm. So that was the first hotel that I worked for, and that was because the man that hired me knew my boss in San Francisco. So when I left the Astro World Hotel because they changed hands, I went to work for Adams Mark for 10 years. So I just had been in the hospitality business. So when I officially retired from working for a salary in 2000, I started doing volunteer work. And then when they found out that I had retired, the Asian Chamber asked me to come and work as a volunteer. That was the Asian Chamber. I worked there for 7 years. And then they found out that I was working as a volunteer, and they said, "Well, this is kind of stupid. We need to pay her," because I was working about 30 hours a week because I was already on Social Security. Mm-hmm. And then when my boss retired, because when we had a recession in the 80s, and she was really, really good at raising money. But last thing that anybody gives you money for is nonprofits. So nobody was going to join the Asian Chamber of Commerce when we were having the recession. And then I had also done volunteer work for Asia Society for their galas and stuff like that. So when they built the building, they asked me to come in and work as a volunteer. I was supposed to be a permanent 1 day a week volunteer. Then they asked me to become their events administrative assistant because the manager, she was not able to keep up with her contracts and everything. But I didn't want to sell over there because I was spoiled. Working in a hotel, you have a department that sets up your tables. All you have to do is just sit there and write the orders. They tell you what they want and you just take the order, but you physically don't have to do anything. So I was already retired and I wasn't going to do anything physical because it was just, I just can't move tables around anymore. So I did the administrative work for her, and then they finally found out that she still couldn't keep up, so we hired another manager, and then they started doing their own contracts again, and I moved to the front did the front desk and just reception stuff, because I wasn't supposed to work over 20 hours a week, because they didn't want to pay benefits, which was fine, because I was already getting all the benefits from being retired officially. So I was there for 12 years. They opened in 2012, and I stayed until 2023, 2024, yeah. No, 2023. I retired in 2023. But I still go back and help them if they need help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for answering our questions. Dr. Lee, do you have any more?
Yeah, sure. I could ask them. Well, I guess just some follow-up questions. Like you mentioned, the racial connections that they asked, like back in the day, the Chinese, the black and whites, like during the time. Did you see any change in this dynamic over time?
I never felt, I guess I was sort of oblivious to things. Some of my friends, the ones that are my same age, they said that they could tell that there was a lot of prejudice. But like I said, we had a really good relationship with all of our customers, because both of the grocery stores that we had, the second grocery store that we had over near the University of Houston, a couple of the students had a fight in the store. So my father, to break this fight up, he broke it up, and he had, it was two football players. They were twice as big as he was. So, but anyway, he broke up the fight, threw them out of the store. So they picketed our store, and they wouldn't let our regular customers come in. The pickets wouldn't. So we just decided, I said, Dad, it's time for you guys to get out of the grocery business anyway, because things were, they'd already done this desegregation thing, with Lyndon Johnson. But I think that sometimes what he did made things a little bit even worse. There was more tension. There were more things happening. All that mess in Los Angeles took place after he declared everything was supposed to be desegregated. So we closed the store, and that's when my father and mother moved to Corpus, and he became a chef for one of his cousins. And they stayed there till they retired. And it was a very fancy restaurant, fancy Chinese restaurant in Corpus Christi, and he loved it, even though there were no other Chinese families there, which is very unusual. But he made a lot of friends. He and Mom made a lot of friends, and then she had to learn to speak English. And she learned to speak English when she was in the store. But when she moved back to California, because they retired in California, because I lived in California at the time, and I got them an apartment right in the middle of Chinatown. She forgot her English just overnight, because Jim Wing's son came, and they used to always converse in English, because my cousin William didn't speak Chinese because his mother was afraid if she taught them Chinese, they wouldn't learn English in school. So actually, I was probably one of the last ones in our generation that could still carry on a conversation with the people from the village, because my mother made us speak Chinese at home. If we didn't speak Chinese to her at home, she wouldn't talk to us. So, I got the egg custers at ECK, which is the Egg Custard King. Every time I go in, he said, "You're the only American-born Chinese girl that I can still speak to like I did in the village." So I went today and I said, "Oh, your dad's gone already." I said, I needed to practice my Chinese a little bit. I thought I'd catch him. But he always leaves at 1 o'clock now. He's semi-retired. He's really nice. But like I said, I don't get to, if you don't get to practice, you really forget. And when I try to talk, it's really clumsy. Wrong syllables, wrong participles and stuff like that. And I used to be able to carry on a conversation pretty well because all of the aunties came over from China. And I would sit and talk with them because I wanted to keep my Chinese up.
Right.
As long as my parents were alive, I talked to them in Chinese, you know. It's just respectful.
Yeah. It's great that you retain that.
So, yeah, but
you
like I
know,
said, I don't get any
heritage.
practice anymore. And then now that I'm meeting more Chinese, most of them are Mandarin speaking.
Right.
I went to Chinese Community Center and took Mandarin. The teacher, she says to me, "Oh, your Southern Chinese accent is so thick." And everybody in my class was there were a couple of black students there, and everybody else was white. And I thought, and they were all doing so well, and I felt so stupid. I dropped out of the class. I did. Here I'm the only Asian face in the class, and I speak the worst. That's what my teacher told me that.
Oh.
So I said, well, I'm going to leave.
Oh.
But it was fun trying. But I'm really bad in languages. My son took German from 9th grade all through high school, and I said, why are you learning German? He said, because it's a challenge. I said, well, why don't you learn to speak Spanish, then you can get a job being a translator or something. He said, Mom, I'm not staying in Texas. He says, as soon as I graduate, I'm out of here. It's too hot here. So he's lived in New York since 2000.
Oh, great.
He only comes back to see me once a year.
Oh, I see. Do you still remember the exact address of those family stores and
Well,
restaurants?
the one in Fifth Ward was 1002 Gregg.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember the number of the one on Delano, but it was on the corner of Delano and Elgin, catty corner from Yates High School. I guess I could drive by there and look it up. I don't think the store is there anymore, but I know the corner.
Yeah, because we are trying to geocode some of these
Yeah,
stores.
right. And
so
there
would
was
help.
a church on one corner, the school was on the other corner, then there was a house on this corner, and our store was on one corner. Yeah, and it had a little esplanade. Elgin was actually a pretty wide street
I see.
going down, and we just headed right into the main gate of the University of Houston. Because I could hop on the bus and go to school.
Right. Yeah, it's also interesting to me when you mentioned, your grocery store serve a lot of Black Americans because one of my good friends actually working on a Chinese American project where similar to ours in Arkansas and Mississippi Delta. So they are saying actually a lot of the immigrants, like Chinese immigrants, like moved down here. Did you come across like a lot of, Chinese community from the Mississippi Delta area?
The Chinese in Mississippi, they all went to little separate towns because of the towns. I think each only had 500 people, but a lot of them, when the children got to be they all had. They were not allowed to go to white schools, either the Chinese. We were in Texas. We were a little luckier. They did let us go to. I guess it would have been okay if they had made us go to Phyllis Wheatley, because we would have known all the kids that were going to school there. But they did let us, and we didn't have to drink in the water fountain that said whites only. We could drink out of the white water fountain. It was pretty bad with signage and stuff, but personally, I never, because like I said, I played with all my neighborhood kids. In fact, the only time that I got punished was because I would take soda and candy, and if I was going to go play with some of the neighborhood children, I would just grab a bag full of stuff and sneak it out of the store and give all our neighborhood goodies like that, And so when I got home, man, and what did my dad did one day, because he wanted to show the children what was happening if they took goodies from me. He chained me to the counter, and he said, this is how she gets punished, because she's taking money out of the store's pocket to give you refreshments. And so then for a long time, the kids wouldn't take anything from me. They said, Faye, if you give us this stuff, you know what your dad's going to do to you. And so we had crazy experiences like that. But it was fun, It was all in good. And it wasn't like I was doing anything really bad. I just thought that you were supposed to share. And I had it, and they didn't.
Oh, that's great. So you lived in both like San Francisco and Houston Chinese community. Like one of our project goals is like really to highlight the uniqueness of like Chinese community and Chinatown here. So what's your experience between the two cities? Like San Francisco Chinatown or
well,
Houston
I remember when
Chinatown.
my roommate was from Houston also. when we got there, because whenever if we came face to face in Houston, you walk past anybody, you just automatically said hello to them and presumed that, okay, if I don't know them, my parents probably know them. And we always spoke back and forth. So every time we would walk down Grand Avenue in San Francisco, we'd smile at everybody. So we had a constant smile on our face. And people looked at us like we were crazy. In fact, I found out now recently that one of my cousins, who was a very good friend of my mom and dad's, she just told me, well, they had a grocery store in Fifth Ward also, but they had 5 daughters and 1 son. And so he sold the grocery store right after the girls started high school, because he said, you know what? I got 5 girls, and all we are is in this neighborhood. If I don't get these girls out of this neighborhood, they're going to end up marrying one of these guys. And back in those days, mixed marriages was not an accepted thing, regardless of, we were supposed to marry another little Chinese boy, And the reason that my mother let me move to California, although it was unheard of back in the 50s, was because all the boys that I knew were just like my brothers, because we were such good friends. She said, they're all like your brothers. So she said, yeah, if you want to go to California, maybe you'll have better luck finding a husband there. Yeah, well, I did. So that was okay. But the aunt that moved her daughters, the 4 girls, when I moved to California, she would look at me and she would give me these really funny looks. So I finally asked her, I said, your mom used to be so nice to me when y'all lived in Texas. Why didn't she speak to me now? She said, she thinks you're a loose woman because you're living out here and you're not living at home with your parents. Because all of those 4 girls lived at home until they got married. Wow. So we were just a little bit ahead of time. Everybody moves out of the house by the time they go to college, right? Yeah. But we didn't back in those generations. You either went to college locally, or you could stay in a dorm if you went out of town. But when you moved, if you didn't get married while you were in college or engaged, you moved back home until you got married. I mean, that was just the thing. So, but I wasn't. I was out gallivanting around, but it was okay.
Wow.
We met some nice people. And all the southern people, all the ones, I met a lot of people from Mississippi because they moved to California also for the same reason, because everybody that they knew in Mississippi were like relatives too. So we formed a club in San Francisco that we call the Southern Hospitality Group. And so we actually ended up throwing more social events, and we got the San Francisco boys and the Oakland boys that were always feuding with each other sort of together. I said, if you want to come to our party, you can come, but you have to be nice to each other. And then they wanted to come because Southern hospitality was famous all the way out to California.
That's great. I hope that stays.
Yeah. Oh, are you moving back to California?
No.
No.
No. Yeah. I'm from the southern part of China, so this weather fits me.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you like this weather?
I
haven't been able to get used to it, and I've been back since '74 because San Francisco's weather is beautiful.
That's true. But
I understand that since we moved away, that when you go to San Francisco now, there's a stench because they got so many homeless people.
Yeah.
So they said it doesn't smell good anymore.
Yeah.
And that's too bad because that was one of the nice things about San Francisco. I love the fog. I love the cool weather.
I know.
Yeah.
I do love the weather and the scenery.
And it did not bother me, the fog. I thought I just wore my hair short like yours and I didn't care.
Yeah. It's the past few years has been bad. Yeah, the crime rates.
I know. That's what they said. In fact, most of my friends won't even go. Well, Grand Avenue, Chinatown, they used to stay open until the bars closed at 2 o'clock. Well, when I was there in November, everything closes at 9 o'clock. And it's just you could shoot a bullet down Grand Avenue because everything is moved out to the Richmond district.
Right. Yeah.
And it's nicer out there because the street is wider and at least people can park on both sides of the street. It's nice.
Yeah.
And they've done a good job. It's a nice Chinatown.
Yeah, exactly. But nowadays, if you walk back to the old Chinatown here, do you have any nostalgia or sadness since everything is gone?
Well, no, because by the time I got back, they had already started. In '74 was when this one was beginning, and there were a couple of very good restaurants in the old Chinatown that we would go to. The place that Mr. Wu opened was the theater, and the best store after the theater closed became the theater became the best store, and they had the best pork, the sioji, and the char siu. And everybody that wanted the good stuff would go there, and it was all very nice. And fresh, and they always changed it. It sold out so fast they could keep it changed until they closed at 6. I always went to Welcome Market to buy my stuff because it was just easier for me because we lived in Memorial and it's easier to go to Chinatown on Bel Air than to go downtown. So I always went to the one in Bel Air.
I see. I see. Yeah. So for the future, so our project mainly tries to educate the public about the Chinese community here and the history of Chinese immigrants. Like, what do you think? Like, what's your suggestion for educators and students that the later generation could do? Like, what do you think it's like lacking in the current research or community?
Well, it's just gotten so, when we were here, when Dad first moved here, I think there were only 500 people in Houston.
Yeah.
Because like I said, we lived downtown, and this lady that lived in the duplex next to us, she used to sort of help my mom take care of me because my sister's only two years younger, and I think she was probably a colicky baby because Mom was real busy with my sister. And she never wanted to go anywhere. People would say, "Oh, you want to go?" And I'd always go. I went down to Brownsville when I was 5, and they put me on the train, and I came back to Houston by myself. The uncle down there would say, he would get on the train with me, and he'd look around and say, "Oh, well, this looks like a pretty clean-cut person." So he went up to him, and he said, "This is my niece. She's only 6, and she's on her way back to Houston. Hopefully she'll sleep all the way in because the train left at 8 o'clock at night, and it was a night train. But it would really be nice. Would you mind keeping an eye on her? Because when they stop for some of the stops to pick up other people, she may think she's in Houston and she'll try to get off the train. Just don't let her get off the train until she gets to Houston, and her father will pick her up there, and he'll be at the door, to meet the train." So, but I fell asleep. Thank goodness he didn't have to work at it. And so she said, and in exchange, she has a lot of food. You can share her lunch. And so that's what they did that to me before I was on my way back, because I had to start school in September, but I had spent the whole summer in Brownsville with relatives because it was just fun being away from home, and I did that. And then my aunt would say to my mother, "Oh, she doesn't want to come back to Houston." Well, that didn't make my mom feel very good, but she said, "Yeah, that sounds like Faye. She never wants to be at home."
That's interesting. Well, I think I'm good with questions. You guys have any other questions? No? So we could casually talk more.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Well,
for this interview.
Right.